Hello, this is Bad Vibes. Today's video is a mixture of two topics, rest stops and hitchhiking. Both can be extremely creepy, so I hope you'll enjoy, and sit back and relax. It happened late last night, around 7:30, so it was pretty dark outside. My friend and I, both 22, female, were about 2/3 of the way through our 16-hour drive back from Salem, Massachusetts. I really needed to pee, so we stopped at a rest area in eastern Pennsylvania. I usually avoid rest areas, but it looked nice enough, and I didn't really have any bad feelings about it. We walked into only one other person inside, who was an older man, probably in his late 60s, standing by the vending machine talking on his phone. We went past him across the room into the bathroom. We were in there for a good 10 to 15 minutes because she wanted to pop a couple pimples. We walked back out laughing at something one of us had said. The man was standing there, but he wasn't on the phone anymore. He stared and smiled at us the entire time it took us to get to the door and exit the rest area. We started running back to the car, which was about 6 parking spaces from the door. We were still laughing, but also a little freaked out. We were about to get back in the car when I remembered that my boyfriend wanted us to check the oil on the way, since it was such a long drive, and the car had been having some slight issues. I considered waiting until next time we needed to stop for gas, but decided to just get it over with. As I was checking the oil, the man from before, along with a slightly younger man we hadn't seen, left the rest area. They both started walking towards us, with the younger one coming head on the sidewalk, and the older one kind of diagonally towards the driver's side of the car. This struck me as odd because there's no other cars past mine. The only cars I could see were on the other side of the lot. My friend and I looked at each other and bolted for the car doors, but then I realized I was still holding the dipstick, so I cursed and we had to run back over and lift the hood back up. We hurried into the car and locked the doors just as they were approaching. We watched the younger man walk slowly past my car, staring in at us with a blank face. He continued walking down the sidewalk for a while, pausing for a second and turning around to come back towards us. The older man, still just smiling, got within a few feet of the driver's side door, then turned and walked past to the other side of the parking lot. I backed out, and once I straightened out the car and started pulling forward to leave the rest area, we saw that he had moved to the middle of the road and was just standing there with the same unnerving smile. But now he was motioning for us to stop. I drove past him because, no way. We watched in the mirrors as both men got into their cars on the other side of the parking lot that was closer to the building. We spent the next couple hours shaking up and babbling about what could have happened. I'm not sure what their intentions were, but there can't be a good reason to approach two women like that at a rest area. I tried telling myself maybe they were going to ask us if we needed help with our car troubles, but I was clearly just checking the oil. And it doesn't make sense why the younger man would just walk the complete opposite direction from his car and go so far down the sidewalk. So I'm not really sure. I had to drive to my parents' place a few hours away and back today. I pulled over halfway. It's about a 5-hour drive one way. I needed to use the restroom and stretch my legs. The lot was fairly empty. A semi-truck, 2 other vehicles, a young family at one of the tables, nothing weird. I go into the ladies' room. All the stalls are free. I pick my stall and start doing my thing. Someone comes in and picks a stall next to me. All the other stalls are still empty. Then they start whistling this creepy tune. That's when I realized that they're standing to pee. They could be trans and using the right restroom, but the creepy whistling was what got to me. And why I picked the stall right next to me when there were 9 other empty stalls. I've listened to enough true crime podcasts to make me significantly paranoid. Cut my time short, washed my hands, and booked it before they even left the stall. A highway rest stop is not where I plan on dying. So my grandma and I decided to drive from Illinois to Oklahoma City to visit my dad. We made it there, and I got to see a lot of my family that I had not seen in years. I lived in Oklahoma for 6 years. On the way home, my grandma asked me to pull over at the next rest stop, and I obliged. It was in the middle of a bright spring day. We both got out and headed to the ladies' room. I noticed a guy standing behind a tree just staring. It gave me the creeps, but I didn't give it another thought. My grandma gave me a shout telling me that she was going back to the car. I finished up and headed outside. Creepy guy was still standing behind the tree. I walked a little faster and he started pacing me. I was about to scream when a family came around the corner to use the bathroom. It was enough to make him leave me alone. We got back on the road, and about a mile down there was a roadblock. They were stopping everyone because they were looking for some seriously deranged psychopath. I told them to check the rest stops in hopes that they would catch him. It gives me chills thinking about it today. I was only 21 at the time, but I wasn't naive. I thank that family, even though they didn't even know what happened. So to the psycho at the rest stop in Missouri, I hope we never meet again. So I was driving by myself on a highway in Maine, cranking killer tunes, slamming Mountain Dew big gulps, and sucking back American Spirit lights. Decided to go hog wild at a Taco Bell drive-thru and ordered an enormous amount of food, extra fixins. So I devoured the Taco Bell, had the full menu of sorts, live Moss. Of course, about 40 minutes after I ate, my stomach began seizing and cramping. There's going to be no refunds, no returns. Luckily, I see a rest stop coming up in 2 miles, so I floored it and pulled in. It was about 1:30 a.m. and it seemed pretty vacant. There's one other vehicle in the lot, windows steamed up. I assumed it was another road tripper who had pulled over to rub one out. We've all been there, no judgment. I get out of my car and run into the men's room. I was holding the bottom of my pants when I was running because I wasn't sure if I was going to make it. Finally, I'm in a stall and it's not a good scene. Figuring that I would be in there for a while, I brought my smokes and a copy of Mad Magazine that I always kept in my car for emergencies like this. I was working on my 4th American Spirit when I hear another person come in. Footsteps stop. I hear him taking deep breaths. I holler out, "Hey man, I'd keep those breaths shallow." No response. I can see dude's feet right in front of my stall. They're fucking huge. Gotta be at least size 17s. Dirty as shit too. I sit in silence, staring at those huge shoes. Suddenly, ass blasts squeeze out, and the sound echoes in the empty restroom. All of a sudden, this guy starts pounding on the door, then grabbing the top and shaking it. "I'll be out in a minute, you spaz." Then it stopped. I hear footsteps again, and then a lot of squeaking. Then footsteps again, and the door opening and slamming shut. Of course, there's no toilet paper in the stall, and it was not a clean pinch, as you can imagine. I had to use my Mad Magazine. Alfred E. Newman has never been so disrespected. I exit the stall and see in the marker written on the mirror, "See you outside," and it was signed, Nitro. I'm born and bred in Maine. I've met a lot of guys who go by Nitro. Not a one do I want to meet alone at a rest stop in the middle of fucking nowhere. I was terrified. I hatch a plan that I'm gonna just go for it. I open the restroom doors and sprint to my car. Not looking back, I just ran. I hear shuffling of footsteps behind me. "Urgh!" I hear behind me. I left my car unlocked because it was a piece of shit, and I get right in. I get the car going and do a bit of a burnout and speed off. I see in the rearview mirror the silhouette of a massive man, throwing his hat on the ground and began jumping up and down as I sped onto the highway. No idea what this guy's intentions were, but it was easily a top 5 scary moment for me, and I can't really bring myself to poop in a public restroom since. One day we stopped at a rest stop in Florida. I've been to this particular stop several times, and I must note that I've always picked up a creepy vibe from it. Then again, it's a rest stop. What do you expect? Anyways, I got out of the car and walked to the ladies' room. When you walk in, there were sinks on the left, stalls on the right, and straight ahead, at the end of the bathroom, was a door labeled staff only. So I went into a stall and did my business. When I stepped out, I started washing my hands. Everything was normal. Suddenly, I heard the door open, so I glanced to my right, fully expecting to see someone walking out of the stall. To my surprise, it was a man walking out of the staff-only door. I stood there for a moment, just staring at him. As he stared back, he shuffled over to the stall and walked inside, then walked out and started heading to the stall next to it. I didn't take the time to see what he was doing. I just got out of there quick. It was pretty creepy. I thought about how it could have been a misunderstanding. Maybe he thought it was empty and he had to clean. The only problem was he had no cleaning supplies, and usually a female would clean the girls' bathroom. It could have been innocent, but it did creep me out. I took in a hitchhiker that turned out to be crazy, as in legit crazy. I won't ever do that anymore, and hopefully my experience will discourage you also. I live in a foreign country, and I don't know about your country's measures against the pandemic, but at the time, we were no longer confined. It happened in September of last year. I was driving from my parents' house to a friend's apartment near our college campus. It was about an hour-and-a-half drive. We had plans to spend the week together after not seeing each other for months. Even though the incident is not related to my friend in any way, it just hit me how dangerous it actually was when I started telling them what happened. I remember one of them saying that this must have been the worst 45-minute drive of my life. I laughed at it back then, but it hits me now how true it was. I left late that day, around 9 p.m., because I remember the sun had already set and I was going to arrive late, which I didn't like. I was used to the road as I often take it. For some context, it was an hour-and-a-half drive and I would usually stop midway in a McDonald's parking lot to smoke a cigarette before carrying on. This is important for the story. I saw a hitchhiker not long after I left my parents. I had driven about 10 to 15 minutes or so when I saw him at the exit of a roundabout. It was a tall, slender guy with one of those teeny shoulder bags guys wear across their chest. I thought it was a guy in his 20s that had just been dropped off by his friends on his way back from partying or something, which was stupid because it was still too early for a party to end. But that was the first thought I had, and I immediately felt sympathy and stopped. I rolled down the passenger window and asked where he was going. I realized right away that he was way older than I thought, at least in his 30s. He had a really pale face, and the way he looked at me honestly freaked me out. The guy was going in my direction, to town, where I would stop midway to take a break. I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest. I just responded automatically that it was on my way, and he opened the door. I had the worst 45 minutes of my life. I don't mean to be dramatic, but it was really hell. I knew right away that I had made a mistake as I drove off, because as soon as I started driving, he held his stomach tight, crouched himself in the passenger seat, going back and forth, saying he wasn't feeling good. I offered to open my window to give him some fresh air. He said he just had to take his meds, which he didn't. Saying I felt uncomfortable is an understatement. I remember thinking I had screwed up, and whatever happened, I should not stop under any circumstances. The first thing I did ask him was if he would like to be dropped off at that city's McDonald's. The parking lot was well lit, and there were usually people there until midnight, and I could also leave immediately onto a fast road. I think he agreed, but either way, it didn't matter because I wasn't planning on stopping elsewhere. I was already freaked out, though I pretended to focus on the road and tried to appear as calm as I could. He kept talking during this whole time. I don't remember in what order it happened exactly, but I remember he asked me if he could look at my nails. I had no nail polish, to which I responded I was driving. He apologized, said I shouldn't worry because he never raped anyone. He told me his girlfriend was mad at him, wanted to break up with him if he didn't come back. Asked where I was going, what I was planning to do tonight, if I was planning on having a long steaming bath, if I had a boyfriend, how we like to do it. I said that was private and I didn't want to answer. He nodded and said he used to be young too, until he got arrested. This is not a typo. Young until arrested was his words. He insisted twice that we were being followed by cars, asked me if I smoked weed. I said no, and offered me a cigarette. I said that was nice, but he didn't have to. He left the cigarette on my dashboard. He took out his phone at one point and wanted to show me a picture of him and a picture of his mom, saying she was beautiful. I took a quick glimpse, and the freaking thing was broken. Like, it had multiple straight black lines, broken pixels, and it was reddish on the left and yellowish on the right, which made the picture really creepy. He got mad at that point because I just took a quick glimpse, and he started talking louder, saying I don't give a fuck about what he's saying. I straight up said, "I'm listening, I can't watch, I'm driving." He calmed down immediately, said, "Okay, sorry," and wanted to show me another picture. He asked me if this was my car. I told him it was my parents'. Somehow I didn't want him to think that I was rich or had any kind of money. I lied, saying that I hit a deer last week and that I was trying to focus and pay attention because I didn't want to break my parents' car. I had hoped he would shut up. He didn't. At some point, he was just straight up staring at me, and he muttered, "Poor thing." He then straightened up and pointed at a road sign in a panic, saying, "I meant the road sign. Poor road sign." Honestly, I think at that point, I was thinking if he ever tried anything, I would crash the car into a tree, because if I could not make it out, neither would he. I'm ashamed to say this, but I didn't get him out of my car that easily. He screamed that his name was Archangel Michael. He asked my name. I gave him a fake one, said something like, "Michael, right?" And he crashed himself again in panic, going back and forth, saying that I shouldn't know his name. I just said, "Okay." To be honest, that's the only thing I could say in the end. When we came into the city where he had to stop, he asked me if I could take him to the train station. It was almost 10 p.m., and I knew that there was no trains, no lights, and surely no other cars or human presence. I told him we had said that we would stop at McDonald's. He nodded, yes. He said I was nice, put a coin on the dashboard next to the cigarette. I stopped in the parking lot, but did not park. I just stopped right there in the middle of the way where I felt the most exposed. He just left saying, "See you later." And I drove away very fast. Never saw or heard from him again. I hope you'll never take a hitchhiker in. I know I won't ever again. I was a pretty brave person when I was younger, or maybe I just had the sense of invincibility that comes with youth. I survived things like a stalker who pursued my sister and I for over a year and a half, being sexually assaulted, 2 house fires, and growing up in a house that I swear to you was haunted. Not in that Disney way either. I'm talking torture chamber in the basement and strange things going on. Anyway, I suppose looking back, that having been through all of that made me feel a little like either I was some sort of invincible, or maybe I just assumed that I had gotten all the bad stuff out of the way and nothing else would happen. Whatever it was, I learned to know better. When I was 17, I didn't have a driver's license. I walked most places, occasionally catching rides with friends, and, less occasionally, hitchhiking. The night in question was one of those seldom seen occasions where I decided to hitchhike. I had worked late and was too exhausted to walk. Now, most of the time when I did hitchhike, I wouldn't get in a car with a lone man, only woman, or rarely, a man with his wife or girlfriend and or kids in the car. That night, though, cars were few and far between, and it was cold. And really, if I'm being frank, when he pulled over, I took a good look and figured I could take him if he tried anything. He was on the slender side and had a strange frailness about him, even though he looked healthy enough. I got into his car after we agreed on the destination. We exchanged names, and I warmed my fingers in front of the heating vent. He spoke quietly, asking me a few questions along the lines of if I was local and how I liked living there. He said that he had only been there for a couple months, but found it beautiful and hoped he could find happiness there. That comment struck me as a little odd, but I brushed it off. It began to snow and the road quickly got slippery, so he slowed down and kept his eyes straight out the windshield, driving silently. I was okay with that, as small talk was never my forte. About 10 minutes later, I noticed a car near the intersection we were approaching seemed to be sliding, so I said, "Watch out." He immediately hit the gas, shooting through the intersection, and burst out with, "Don't ever scream at me." Needless to say, I was taken aback. I said, "Look, this is close enough. Just pull over here and I can get out." He didn't seem to hear me. Richard, did you hear me? I said you can pull over right here and let me out." No response. He just stared straight ahead, driving faster now than he had been since it began to snow. To say I was scared doesn't seem to cover the depth of fear that began to arise in me. I didn't know if I should stay quietly or speak, but I was damn sure not going to yell after his outburst. After about a mile, he began to mumble something under his breath. I couldn't quite make out what he was saying, but I assumed that he was speaking to me, so I said, "What? I can't hear you." He began to speak quietly and rapidly, saying things like, "You're always yelling at me. I told you time and time again I don't appreciate being yelled at, but do you listen? No. Well, I'm done listening to you now. Do you hear that?" I was completely lost. I didn't know what to say in response, or if I should say anything at all. I contemplated just jumping out of the car, but nixed that idea when I realized that the door lock was missing. There was just a silver-lined hole where it should have been. I started to cry and debate with myself about causing an accident by grabbing the wheel and hoping for the best. At least, I figured there was a chance I would survive that. He suddenly looked at me for the first time since I had gotten in the car. He blinked several times, rapidly, then slowed the car down, pulling into a gas station. I waited to see if he would unlock the doors, not wanting to say anything to set him off again. After a minute or two, he quietly said, "I think I better let you out here." He hit the button to unlock the doors. I wasn't about to hesitate. I jumped out of the car as if it were on fire. I was about to turn and walk into the gas station when he called out my name. He looked so damn sad. I hesitated. He apologized, said that he was sorry that he frightened me, and that he would never have harmed me. Asked if I would be able to get home okay. I said I would and closed the door. He began to pull out of the gas station, but stopped suddenly. He just sat there for a couple moments, his head down. I froze, wondering what the hell he was up to, and was about to run into the station. At that moment, he opened his window and yelled at me, waved something in his hand. My hat. I had left it on the seat. I warily approached his side of the car, and he handed it to me, apologizing again. I didn't know what else to say, so I just said, "Thanks." I watched him drive off, making sure he was out of sight before moving on, so he wouldn't know which direction I was heading to. I decided to go to a friend's house instead of home. As I walked, I went to put my hat back on. A piece of paper fell out. Folded in the paper was a $100 bill. The paper said, "I'm sorry, please take a cab and don't hitchhike anymore tonight." I didn't. In fact, it was the last time I ever hitchhiked a ride alone. My friend and I decided to drive to Philadelphia to Miami Beach. The car block cracked in North Carolina. This was around 1975. I thought it would be an adventure to hitchhike the rest of the way. I remember waiting all night on a godforsaken stretch of highway in Fayetteville, North Carolina. We got a ride from some guy with a Prince Valiant haircut, who upon dropping us off said, "I'll probably see you guys in the morning on my way to work." 9 hours later, sure enough, he picked us up in a station wagon filled with vending machine sandwiches. We finally got to the area around the border with South Carolina. That's when the guy, spitting an image of Bundy in retrospect, stopped and asked us where we were going. When I said Miami, he said, "What street?" We were overjoyed that this young guy, older than us, was going to take us straight to my mother's house in Bay Harbor. Now, I cannot prove that this was Ted Bundy, but what happened was creepy, and I have researched a little and found that this happened at the time after Bundy's prison break in Colorado, and at the same time he supposedly moved to Florida. Anyway, after we got in the car, he offered us a joint. He said he didn't want any, but told us that we could toke up. Well, whatever was in that joint was powerful enough to almost paralyze us both. He then began to start playing with the buttons on the radio, switching stations compulsively, almost every few seconds. I began to feel paranoid because I could sense some weirdness exuding from this guy. I was in the front seat and my friend in the back. We went to a rest stop and he disappeared into a bathroom for about an hour. When he finally got back to the car, he said he had to take a detour to his bank and started to take us miles through some small roads in Georgia. I remember seeing houses on stilts in marshland. He finally stopped in the most remote location where there was a single building that looked like an abandoned tavern. We were still stoned. He got out of the car and went behind the building. I just remember seeing palm trees and was shocked that palm trees were this far north in Georgia. He got back in the car and had these sunglasses on. I noticed that he seemed short as he walked back to the car. He said he now had to speak with his lawyer and began talking about real estate law and the changes in the law that would allow development in this area. We then drive hours and hours until we get to Jacksonville. He pulled the car over in a strip mall-like area and told us that there was a change of plans. We had to get out there. We were exhausted and hungover from angel dust or whatever was in that joint. We saw a bus station and took the rest of the way to Miami. As I think back, I'm almost certain this was Ted Bundy. I still see his face, and the time frame and location were right. We were 2 men, so I don't think that we were in danger, unless Bundy was considering killing men. I think he was just enjoying mind-fucking us, and that is my story.